There is a moment that happens to a great many people somewhere in their early to mid-40s. And it happens quietly enough that most people do not notice it as a single event. It feels more like a slow drift. Foods that were always fine start to feel unpredictable. A meal you have eaten 100 times now leaves you bloated for hours. Your digestion, which used to operate in the background of your life without ever asking for your attention, starts demanding it. You feel heavier after eating than you used to. Your energy in the early afternoon dips in a way that feels connected to your stomach rather than your sleep. And you find yourself wondering, somewhat confused, what changed? You have not dramatically altered your diet. You are not doing anything wildly different from what you were doing in your 30s. And yet your gut is behaving as though something fundamental has shifted. Something has, and once you understand what it is, 3 specific behaviors that your gut tolerated without complaint at 30, become genuinely important to stop. Not because they were ever good for you, because your gut, after 40, no longer has the resilience to absorb the damage they caused the way it once did. Today I am going to walk you through exactly what changes in your gut biology after the age of 40, and the 3 specific things you need to stop doing if you want your gut to function the way it has aged. For the next several decades of your life, this is not about adding another supplement or another superfood to your routine. This is about removing the things that are actively working against the gut you already have. My name is Dr. Sarah Monroe. I spent 12 years in internal medicine, and one of the most consistent patterns I observed in patients in their 40s and 50s was a noticeable shift in digestive complaints that had no obvious external trigger. The diet had not changed dramatically. The stress levels were comparable to years before, and yet the gut symptoms were new, or worse, or both. Understanding the biology of gut aging changed how I approach these conversations completely, and I think it will change how you think about your own digestion as well. Let me start with the biological foundation, because without it, the 3 behaviors I am about to describe will seem unrelated with it. They will make complete sense. After the age of 40, 3 specific changes begin in the gut that, taken together, explain why the digestive resilience of your 30s starts to erode. The first is a measurable slowing of gut motility, the rhythmic muscular contractions that move food through your digestive tract. As motility slows, food and its byproducts remain in contact with the intestinal lining for longer periods, giving less beneficial bacteria more time to ferment material and produce inflammatory byproducts, and giving any irritating substance more time to do its damage before being cleared. The second change is a gradual decline in stomach acid production, a condition called age-related hypochlorhydria. Stomach acid serves 2 critical functions. It begins a breakdown of proteins for digestion, and it acts as your first line of immune defense, killing the majority of bacteria and pathogens that enter through food before they reach your intestines. As acid production declines with age, both of these protective functions weaken. Protein digestion becomes less efficient, and more potentially harmful microorganisms survive the trip through your stomach intact. The third and most significant change is a measurable increase in intestinal permeability with age, a gradual weakening of the tight junction proteins that hold the cells lining your gut together in a sealed barrier. Research published in the journal Immunity and Aging has documented this age-related increase in gut permeability, sometimes referred to as leaky gut in popular health language, showing that the gut barrier that effectively protects a 30-year-old becomes measurably more permeable and more vulnerable by the time most people reach their mid-40s and beyond. These 3 changes, slower motility, reduced stomach acid, increased permeability, do not make your gut fragile or doomed. They make it less resilient to specific stressors than it used to be, which means the behaviors that your gut absorbed without consequence at 30 now have meaningfully larger effects. Let us go through the 3 you need to stop. The first thing you must stop doing after 40 is eating late at night, close to bedtime, on a regular basis. I want to be precise about what I mean, because this is not simply about weight management or sleep quality, both of which I have addressed in other videos on this channel. This is specifically about a biological system most people have never heard of: your gut's own internal circadian clock. Your gut microbiome does not operate on a flat, constant schedule. Research published in the journal Cell Host and Microbe has demonstrated that gut bacterial populations follow their own roughly 24-hour rhythm, with specific bacterial species becoming more or less active at different times of day, largely synchronized to your eating and sleeping patterns during the hours your body expects to be fasting overnight. While you sleep, specific repair and maintenance processes occur in the gut lining, including the renewal of the protective mucus layer and the repair of tight junction proteins that I just described as weakening with age. This overnight repair window is when your gut does its most important maintenance work. When you eat close to bedtime on a regular basis, you disrupt this rhythm into specific ways. First, you keep the digestive system actively working during a period when it should be transitioning into its overnight maintenance mode. diverting resources away from repair and toward active digestion. Second, and this is particularly relevant after 40 given the reduced stomach acid I described, food sitting in a less acidic stomach for longer overnight provides an extended opportunity for less desirable bacterial species, ones that thrive in lower acid, slower moving environments, to proliferate. A study from the Salk Institute found that mice fed exclusively during the normal rest period developed significantly different, less favorable gut microbiome compositions compared to mice fed during the normal active period, independent of total caloric intake. The timing, not just the content, of your last meal matters. For someone in their 30s with robust gut motility, strong stomach acid, and a tight intestinal barrier, occasional late eating is absorbed without much consequence. For someone in their 40s or 50s with motility already slowing, acid already declining, and the barrier already weakening, regular late-night eating compounds each of those age-related changes simultaneously. The practical guideline is straightforward. Finish eating at least 3 hours before bed consistently, and reserve the occasional late meal for genuine exceptions rather than a regular pattern. The second thing you must stop doing after 40 is taking over-the-counter painkillers casually and frequently, specifically nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and NSAIDs like ibuprofen, naproxen, and aspirin. I want to be clear that I am not talking about prescribed use under medical supervision for a specific condition. I am talking about the extremely common pattern of reaching for ibuprofen for a headache, a sore back, period pain, or general joint discomfort multiple times a month, as a matter of casual habit, a pattern that becomes dramatically more common after 40 as minor aches and pains increase in frequency. Here is the mechanism, and it is one that very few people who take these medications regularly have ever had explained to them. NSAIDs work by inhibiting an enzyme called cyclooxygenase, which reduces the production of prostaglandins, the compounds responsible for the pain and inflammation you are trying to relieve. But prostaglandins serve another critical function entirely unrelated to pain. They maintain the protective mucus layer that lines your stomach and intestines, the layer that shields the delicate gut tissue underneath from digestive acid and from the mechanical and chemical stress of normal digestion. When NSAIDs suppress prostaglandin production for pain relief, they simultaneously suppress the mucus production that protects your gut lining. Research published in the American Journal of Gastroenterology has shown that even short-term NSAID use can cause measurable damage to the intestinal lining, increasing permeability and creating microscopic erosions in a significant proportion of regular users, often without any symptoms the person would notice. The gut simply absorbs the damage silently. Now combine this with what I described earlier about increased age-related intestinal permeability. A gut barrier that is already more vulnerable at 45 than it was at 30 has significantly less capacity to withstand the additional mucosal damage that casual, frequent NSAID use inflicts. This is also directly relevant to a previous video on this channel about kidney health. NSAIDs reduce blood flow to the kidneys through a related prostaglandin mechanism, meaning the same casual habit that damages your gut after 40 is simultaneously placing additional stress on your kidneys. This does not mean NSAIDs should never be used. For acute, occasional pain, use is directed. They remain a reasonable option for most healthy adults. The behavior to stop is a casual, frequent, almost reflexive reach for them multiple times a month without considering alternatives or addressing the underlying cause of the recurring pain. After 40, this habit carries a meaningfully higher cost to your gut lining than it did 15 years earlier. The third thing you must stop doing after 40 is allowing chronic stress to go unaddressed and unrecovered from, specifically the pattern of sustained psychological stress without adequate recovery periods, rather than stress itself, which is unavoidable and not the actual problem. The distinction matters, and I will explain exactly why. The gut and the brain communicate continuously through what researchers call the gut-brain axis, primarily via the vagus nerve, and I touched on this connection in a previous video on this channel about brain fog when stress is chronic and unmanaged, meaning your nervous system remains in an activated, sympathetic dominant state for extended periods without sufficient time in the parasympathetic, rest and digest state. Cortisol remains elevated for longer than it should. Chronically elevated cortisol has a specific and significant effect on gut immunity. It reduces the production of secretory immunoglobulin A, known as secretory IgA, which is a primary antibody responsible for protecting your gut lining from pathogens and maintaining a healthy balance of gut bacteria. Lower secretory IgA means reduced frontline immune protection at exactly the location where your barrier is already weakening with age. Chronic stress also has a direct and measurable effect on the composition of your gut microbiome itself. Research published in the journal Brain Behavior and immunity found that sustained psychological stress was associated with significant reductions in lactobacillus and bifidobacterium populations, two of the most beneficial bacterial genera in the human gut, responsible for producing short-chain fatty acids that nourish the gut lining and for supporting the immune regulation I have described in previous videos on this channel. Here is a compounding problem specific to people over 40. These same beneficial bacterial populations decline naturally with age as part of the normal aging process independent of stress when chronic, unmanaged stress is added on top of that natural age-related decline. The reduction in protected bacteria happens faster and more severely than either factor would cause alone. You are accelerating a decline that was already going to happen, compressing what might have taken decades into a much shorter time frame. I also want to connect this to something I discussed in a previous video about belly fat after 40, because the biology overlaps directly. After 40, the body becomes more sensitive to cortisol's effects across multiple systems simultaneously, not just visceral fat storage, but gut barrier integrity and microbiome composition as well. The same hormonal vulnerability that makes chronic cardio counterproductive for belly fat after 40 is a hormonal vulnerability that makes unmanaged chronic stress particularly damaging to your gut at this stage of life. The behavior to stop is not stress itself, which is an unavoidable part of being alive, but the absence of genuine recovery from it. Brief, structured recovery practices, even 5 to 10 minutes, of slow diaphragmatic breathing, time in nature, or any activity that reliably shifts you into a parasympathetic state, measurably reduce cortisol and have been shown in research to support healthier secretory IgA levels and more favorable gut bacterial composition over time. The goal after 40 is not eliminating stress. It is ensuring that your nervous system has genuine, regular opportunities to step out of the stress response and into recovery. Let me bring these three together, because understanding why they matter specifically after 40 is the entire point of this video. Your gut motility has slowed, giving anything irritating more time to cause damage. Your stomach acid has declined, weakening your first line of defense in your protein digestion. Your intestinal barrier has become more permeable, reducing your tolerance for additional stressors. Eating late at night disrupts the overnight repair window your gut now needs more than ever. Casual NSAID use suppresses the prostaglandins, protecting a barrier that is already more vulnerable. Chronic unmanaged stress reduces the immune protection and depletes the beneficial bacteria that your gut can least afford to lose at this stage. None of these three things were necessarily harmless before 40, but your gut had more resilience in reserve to absorb their impact. That reserve has changed. And the good news, genuinely, is that all three of these are entirely within your control to address starting today. Finishing your last meal 3 hours before bed. Reserving NSAIDs for genuine acute need rather than casual habit. Building structured recovery time into a stressful life rather than hoping the stress simply resolves on its own. This is not about fear. It is about precision. Your gut after 40 needs a slightly different relationship with you than it did at 30. Once you understand what has changed biologically, the adjustments required are straightforward, free, and entirely achievable. I want to hear from you in the comments. Which of these three things do you do regularly? The late-night eating, the casual painkiller use, or the unmanaged stress? Your honest answer might be the thing that helps someone else reading the comments recognize a pattern in their own life they had not connected to their gut symptoms. If this video helped you understand a change you have noticed in your own digestion since turning 40, please share it with someone going through the exact same confusion. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, now is a wonderful time. We are building a complete picture of how your body changes with age and exactly what to do about it, system by system with the real science behind every recommendation. I am Dr. Sarah Monroe. Your gut has changed. Now you know exactly how to change with it.